Hello, my name is Megan Dayton. I am the Family and Community Engagement Manager here at Friends of Children and Families. I'm here to do a training on child abuse and neglect today. So, what we're going to cover is understanding what is child abuse and neglect, and understanding your role in responding to and reporting concerns related to child abuse and neglect. And the first thing I want to mention is that according to Idaho law, every person in the state of Idaho is what we call a mandatory reporter. And what that means is that if any person in Idaho has a reason to believe that a child may have been abused or neglected, is responsible to report uh, that belief within 24 hours to the proper agency, which I will talk about what that looks like here in a little bit. Um, and this doesn't mean that you know for sure that a child has been abused or neglected, but again, it's that kind of reasonable, you have reason to believe that. That's what you're reporting on. So let's start by looking at what are the different types of child abuse. There's four main types that we're going to look at today, and that is physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and then neglect. All right, so the definition for physical abuse is non-accidental serious injury to a child. You can see some examples here on the screen. When it comes to physical abuse, this might be something you observe that, children at this age, 3 to 4, do get injured easily. So bruising and things like that aren't necessarily uncommon. However, what we're looking for is maybe signs that it might not have been accidental. So if it's just doesn't look consistent, it looks odd. The other thing is a child may share with you something that would imply that they have been physically harmed. And so that would be the type of thing we would need to report. The definition for emotional abuse is a series of repeated incidents that insult, threaten, isolate, degrade, and or humiliate another person. So here's some examples on the screen. This one can be difficult sometimes to identify. Really, it is about that kind of pattern, consistency, and really impacts a child's worth. So some of these examples are, shaming a child, telling them they're worthless. So again, this would be something to look out for. And this is kind of what is under the umbrella of emotional abuse. Sexual abuse applies to any case where a child has been a victim of sexual conduct, including these following categories: rape, molestation, incest, prostitution, seen photographing, and then other similar forms of sexual exploitation. It is common, again, for, thinking about the age group we work with, 3 or 4 year olds, it is common for kids to be curious about maybe body parts or other genders, like they're kind of learning about all of that at this time. So curiosity does not necessarily mean these things are taking place. But again, if you were to learn that something of this nature was happening, we would absolutely want to report that right away. And then finally, the fourth category is neglect. And this is defined as a failure to provide for a child's basic needs, which could include food, clothing, shelter, medical care, educational opportunities, and protection or supervision. So there's some different kind of red flags here. It is a very large category, and there's a lot of different um, types of neglect, like we just covered. So some different physical indicators. Is a child consistently hungry, not dressed appropriately, things like that. Behavioral indicators, maybe a child stealing food, constantly tired. And then behavioral indicators of a caretaker would be alcohol or drug misuse, disorganized, chaotic, home life, isolated, and on. And again, some of these indicators, that you might see, you know, may or may not mean that neglect is taking place. And so I do just want to say here, and I'll talk about this again later, that our job isn't to investigate or determine for sure what is happening. It is just to report if we have any suspicion or reason to believe that a child um, may be experiencing one of these categories of abuse or neglect. All right, so I mentioned this a little bit, but a child may tell you that something is happening, and there's different ways they might do it. So here's just a few examples. And again, these things do not mean definitively that abuse or neglect is taking place. So, like an indirect comment might be, my babysitter keeps bothering me. So you might want to ask more about that to find out whether there is any reason to believe, that it's abuse or neglect versus, just that could mean a lot of different things. A child might ask a question, kind of implying something has happened, but not saying it outright. Or they may say something like, I have a problem, you have to promise not to tell. So that leads me to kind of my list here of how to respond, when a child discloses something to you, which means when a child, the child is telling you something has happened. First of all, in reference to that last comment specifically, don't make a promise you can't keep. So, promising not to tell anyone or that this will never happen again. We can't, we are required by law to report if it is suspected abuse or neglect. So we can't make a promise that we wouldn't tell. Our top priority is children's safety. You can find a quiet or semi-private place to talk. That is helpful. Staying calm. It's really hard to hear these things. So really taking that deep breath, staying calm, listening carefully to what the child is trying to say, and then not asking leading questions. This one's really important. We don't want to put words in a child's mouth. We don't want to do any sort of investigating. We're not trained in how to do that. So asking just a simple question like, what do you mean when you say so and so is bothering you? Is appropriate, but not saying like, did this happen to you? And really keeping your questions short and simple and not asking too much is good. Let the child know that you believe him or her, that it's not their fault. Refrain from judging or blaming anyone, including the caregivers. We don't know the whole story. We don't know what's true. Write down the child's exact words or perhaps, what you're seeing, observing. That will be helpful in making a report. You do want to report a disclosure immediately, and we'll talk about how to do that next. And then we aren't going to necessarily tell the parents unless I advise that, and there's different reasons for doing that, but just maintaining that confidentiality is really important, and so that's actually really huge. So we wouldn't want to even tell other staff that are not involved, definitely not other family members, until we've had a chance to talk about it. All right, so how do you report this? So hopefully those last few slides helped kind of understand maybe what to look for, or again, just if a child was to, feel safe with you and come up and share something that sounded like it might be child abuse or neglect. Here's what you're going to do. And again, just a reminder that everyone in the state of Idaho is considered a mandatory reporter, which means required by law to report any suspected child abuse or neglect. Okay, so if a child is not in immediate danger, so they're at school and they've shared something or you've observed something, you're going to want to immediately contact the center supervisor at your site. And they're going to help support you with this next step, which is contacting me, the family and community engagement manager. I do help support with any phone calls made, just providing advice on maybe whether or not this is reportable. If I am not able to be contacted for whatever reason, the center supervisor will know who else to contact in the organization. And then, of course, secondly, you're going to contact Child Protective Services directly. We'll talk about that here in a moment. But I do just want to say, if a child is in immediate danger or requires immediate medical attention, go straight to calling 911 first, then letting center supervisor, myself, Nick, and there's other directors that center supervisor might have you call, but we do just want to make sure we acknowledge, that is always an option for immediate danger. All right. So anytime we are going to make a report, there is a form, and here's just a screenshot of it on the screen here on the side. Our child abuse and neglect reporting form. So again, the center supervisor can help you to find this. It's really helpful because it does have the number right at the top, and then it has all the information that you're going to need when making a call. So these are the types of information that the person you're going to be speaking to, the social worker, is going to be asking. And it really helps to write it all out first. It helps know exactly what you're going to say, not forget any details, things like that. After you write it down and make the phone call, you're going to email. And again, you can do this with the support of the center supervisor, but you'll email this form to me. I save them all confidentially, and then the original can be shredded. my role really is to help you and to complete this form, to contact Child Protective Services, make sure you have the number, that you know what to do, determine if and when parents should be notified. That really just depends on the situation. Again, I've said this, but I just want to say again, we we're not going to engage in any form of investigation. We're not going to determine whether or not abuse or neglect is actually happening, and we're not going to always even know that, but it is our responsibility to just report immediately and make sure Department of Health and Welfare or Child Protective Services, it's the same thing that we're referring to, the same department, that they know and that they will then do that investigation because they are trained in this and they may have additional information from maybe a previous call. But again, I do want to emphasize that this is extremely confidential. All of you as volunteers have signed our confidentiality form, and so please do not share this with anyone else who is not involved in this situation. I do just want to mention that there's a lot of ways that Friends of Children and Families is working to help prevent child abuse and neglect. And so I have some of those listed here on the screen, and that would be including our parenting, 11 logic classes, our curriculum we use in the classroom, providing a lot of different resources for the community and just connecting families to each other, to the community. All of these things help to protect our children, our families. And that really is why we have these procedures in place. It all comes down to safety for our kids and partnering together in that. So thank you so much for being a volunteer with Friends of Children and Families, um, and just partnering with us in preventing child abuse and neglect and keeping kids safe. Thank you so much. Oh, and then you can always reach out to me if you would like additional information or have any questions about this. Again, my name is Megan Dayton, and I'm the Family and Community Engagement Manager.